Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: President Trump says a deal to end the Iran war is possible before his visit to China next week. This as Iran's foreign minister meets with China's top diplomat in Beijing at China's invitation. We have the key takeaways. A man allegedly opening a secret Chinese police station in New York is on trial this week. What prosecutors say he did to help Beijing carry out its agenda on U.S. soil and why the case matters. Flora Hua at the courtroom. China is still supplying key drone parts to Russia and Iran despite U.S. sanctions. A new report shows the flow may be increasing. Japan and U.S. forces conduct live-fire drills in a major regional exercise as security cooperation grows amid rising tensions with Beijing in the South China Sea. And a brazen act of foreign interference in Canada. The Chinese consulate pressured Vancouver city officials to cancel a dance performance, Shenyun, but they failed. President Trump telling PBS Wednesday that it's possible to strike a deal with Iran to end the war before his trip to China next week. The comment comes as China urges the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz during talks with Iran's foreign minister in Beijing. Trump said, quote, "I think it's got a very good chance of ending," adding that if it doesn't end, the U.S. would have to go back to bombing them. He warned earlier that the U.S. would resume bombing Iran at a much higher level and intensify if Iran doesn't agree to a deal. And over in Beijing, China's top diplomat Wang Yi met with Iran's foreign minister for the first time since the war began. Wang called for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. He also said China is, quote, "deeply distressed over the war and that a comprehensive ceasefire is needed." The Trump administration has been calling on China to persuade Iran to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. About 1/5 of the world's oil and gas passes through the narrow strait.
It is in China's interest that Iran stop closing the straits. It's harming China as well. China is an export-driven economy. That means they depend on other countries to buy from them. Well, you can't buy from them if you can't ship it there, and you can't buy from them if your economy is being destroyed.
Iran's foreign minister also told Wang about developments in negotiations with the U.S. and Iran's plans to end the conflict. Worth noting, Iran's foreign minister's visit came at Beijing's invitation just a week ahead of the Trump-Xi meeting. A research fellow at a think tank in Taiwan told the Epoch Times the two diplomats lightly discussed how to respond to the U.S. ahead of the meeting. He noted Trump is expected to raise Beijing's support for Tehran and described the official statements as largely rhetorical. He added it's in Beijing's interest for Iran to regain strength and keep the U.S. distracted, preventing Washington from shifting focus to the Indo-Pacific and countering China. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said China's purchase of Iranian oil will be part of the discussion between President Trump and the Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping.
We don't want this to be something that derails the broader relationship or any agreements that might come out of our meeting in Beijing, but it's certainly something that may come up.
Most of Iran's oil is sold to China. The U.S. has sanctioned 5 Chinese oil refineries in an effort to target Iran's oil revenue, but Beijing has told Chinese companies not to comply. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says China's human rights violations remain a key concern for the Trump administration. Rubio says it will be on the agenda during the president's upcoming visit to Beijing.
But we always raise those issues. They're important to us, among with others, of course. But those issues remain prominent in our view and in our conversation about these things. And it will continue to raise them in the appropriate forums.
In 2024, while a U.S. Senator, Rubio introduced a bill aimed at deterring the Chinese regime's state-sanctioned killing of Falun Gong practitioners for their organs. The bill was reintroduced in March by Senators Ted Cruz and Jeff Merkley. It seeks to impose sanctions on those complicit in the abuse. On Taiwan, Rubio says he's sure it will be a topic of the conversation.
Next, a Chinese-born U.S. citizen is on trial this week in federal court in New York. He's accused of taking orders from the Chinese Communist regime illegally, including opening a Chinese police station in the heart of Manhattan. NTD's Flora Hua was there in the courtroom. Here's the latest from the trial.
Can a U.S. citizen open a Chinese police station here in America without telling the U.S. government, and also at the CCP's direction? That's a central concern of this trial, United States v. Liu Jianwang. Liu is accused of conspiracy and of acting as an unregistered foreign agent for the Chinese regime. He is also charged with obstruction of justice. Prosecutors say he deleted messages with a Chinese handler after the FBI became aware of his alleged activities. Federal prosecutors and defense attorneys both finished the opening statements during today's trial. Defendant Liu Jianwang, also known as Harry Liu, has been accused of setting up a Chinese police station in Chinatown in Lower Manhattan. In China, the Ministry of Public Security, also known as the NPS, oversees the country's police force. Unlike police agencies in many other countries, Chinese authorities are tasked by the CCP with suppressing pro-democracy activists, faith groups, and other dissidents. And prosecutors say that campaign has extended overseas. In 2022, China's Ministry of Public Security launched a plan to establish overseas branches. Prosecutors allege Liu flew back to China to attend the launch meeting. They say Liu later returned to the U.S. and helped open a Chinese police station in Manhattan. His defense attorney argues the office was set up to help Chinese nationals renew driver's licenses. But the prosecutors say his actions violate laws and undermines U.S. sovereignty. According to court documents, Liu admitted to the FBI that he worked with a former director of China's NPS 610 office. The office was launched to specifically target faith group Falun Gong. Liu also admitted to taking part in CCP's organized counter-protests against the Falun Gong practitioners in Washington, D.C. Now, Liu's co-defendant Chen Jinping has pleaded guilty in 2024 and is awaiting sentencing 1 year after they both were arrested. Liu has pleaded not guilty to all charges. If convicted on all counts, he faces up to 20 to 25 years in prison. Reporting from Brooklyn, New York, Flora Hua, NTD News.
The U.S. Geological Survey has found over 2.5 million tons of lithium in the Appalachian region. According to the agency, that's enough to replace over 300 years' worth of imports. The discovery comes as the United States works to reduce reliance on China for critical minerals. A new USGS scientific paper published in Natural Resources Research shows most of that lithium concentrated in the Carolinas, with other deposits in Maine and New Hampshire. According to the agency, it's enough to power 130 million electric vehicles, 180 billion laptops, and 500 billion cell phones. China-linked drone supplies continue despite U.S. sanctions. A new report from the Wall Street Journal Tuesday shows China is still supplying key drone components to Russia and Iran. That's despite U.S. and European restrictions. And officials say this flow might be increasing. Weapons analysts note Chinese companies are shipping large volumes of drone parts, including engines, microchips, and fiber optic cables. For years, China redirected Western-made components into restricted weapon programs by mislabeling shipments. But now, more of those parts are being made inside China itself, often by smaller companies facing little risk. One major concern is Iran's Shahed drone. It's a low-cost, long-range attack drone widely used in conflicts. Investigators say the parts needed to build those drones are still reaching Iran and Russia through networks, including shell companies and third-party shipments. U.S. officials acknowledge they may not be able to fully stop the trade. Instead, they are focused on raising costs and disrupting Russia and Iran's supply chains for drone components. Allies hold live fire drills in the Indo-Pacific. Japan has carried out a live missile firing during a major joint military exercise with the U.S. and other allies. China says it marks the first time since World War II that Japan has deployed what Beijing calls an offensive weapon abroad. The drills Wednesday highlight expanding security cooperation in the region as tensions with Beijing remain high in the South China Sea. The drill saw Japan launch an anti-ship missile from its self-defense forces roughly 46 miles off the coast of the Philippines. It struck a decommissioned ship off the northern Philippines, facing the South China Sea. The exercise was conducted alongside forces from the U.S., Australia, and the Philippines as part of annual war games. Officials say the drills are designed to improve how allied forces operate together across the region. This year's exercises are among the largest to date. It involved more than 17,000 troops. U.S. forces also tested long-range strike systems, including missile launches from newly deployed platforms in the Philippines. Beijing has criticized the drills, claiming they increased regional tensions, while organizers say the focus is on deterrence and regional stability. Coming up, a brazen act of foreign interference in Canada. The Chinese consulate pressured Vancouver city officials to cancel a dance performance, Shenyun, but they failed. And with a high-stakes Trump-Xi summit fast approaching, what cards does each side hold? Best-selling author Lee Smith joins us to unpack it all. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Beijing's long arm in Canada trying to influence local officials failed. Officials from the Chinese consulate met with Vancouver city officials last month to pressure them not to allow Shenyun to perform. The attempts failed and the performance went ahead as planned. But this is just a snapshot of China's attempts to stop the dance company from performing in a free country. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
This goes directly against national and international law.
Officials from the Chinese consulate pressured a Vancouver city official last month to not allow Shenyun to perform at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, a city-owned venue. It's the latest attempt by the Chinese Communist Party to interfere with the New York-based dance company that performs under the tagline China before communism.
Now, there was never a doubt in our minds that theaters here in Canada were being pressured by the Chinese Communist Party to cancel Shenyun. But now we have the smoking gun.
The report was first made known by Global News, citing anonymous sources, but a spokesperson for the city later confirmed this to our sister media, the Epoch Times. Chinese and city officials discussed a range of cultural topics, including Shenyun. The spokesperson wouldn't say what Chinese officials were asking for specifically regarding Shenyun, but sources who spoke to the Global News said that the consulate wanted the shows canceled. The former mayor of Vancouver says he's never seen this kind of foreign interference in his city.
Taking pot shots at politicians is one thing, but starting to infiltrate within the civil service and directly intimidating civil servants is, I haven't heard of that before. So this is perhaps an emboldened move by the consulate.
Now this fits a years-long global pattern. Chinese consulates in Chicago, London, Madrid, Thailand, and elsewhere have issued demands and letters to venues and local governments to block Shenyun. Other tactics include hundreds of hoax, bomb, and death threats, some traced to China, slashed tour bus tires, smear campaigns, and even bribery attempts. In 2024, 2 Chinese agents were sentenced to prison for attempting to bribe an IRS agent to investigate Shenyun. Vancouver police traced a recent bomb threat to a China-based number, but the shows went ahead as planned. Toronto canceled 6 shows, later rescheduling, over similar threats from the same email address in which the sender called the Chinese Communist Party his motherland. Shenyun was formed in 2006 to revive traditional Chinese culture, a culture diminished under communist rule.
Why is a self-called global power afraid of a dance company? Because Shenyun showcases a wonderful China before communism and exposes human rights abuses that the Communist Party has spent decades hiding from the world.
And despite this growing pressure, Shenyun continues to perform for audiences worldwide. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
All eyes on the upcoming high-stakes summit between Trump and Xi. Who has the cards heading into this meeting and what's changed since their last one? Joining us now to unpack all of this is Lee Smith. He's the best-selling author of The China Matrix, the epic story of how Donald Trump shattered a deadly pact. Lee Smith, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Great to be with you here today.
Now, a big focus, of course, is on that upcoming Trump-Xi summit in Beijing. Now, this comes as the Iran conflict is still unresolved. How do you see Trump's strategy heading into this? What are the cards each side has?
Well, the last time they met many months ago, remember what preceded that meeting was the Beijing's threat to withhold rare earth minerals, and of course this sent the administration scrambling. Right now the positions are very different, since Donald Trump is now has a hand on lots of the oil that Beijing was getting at very steep discounts. So right now, Donald Trump controls a lot of China's energy, and that makes things very different. So Xi no longer has the amount of leverage that he had before their last meeting. So I think that things have changed quite a bit, even though Iran has not been resolved. The president has seen Iran not only as a problem in itself, but also as a key ally of China, and right now that ally is in big trouble. And of course, the other thing is that neither China nor Russia have done much to help Iran out of its very serious jam, and there's not much that they can do.
Given the talks we've seen between officials before these trips, some of the topics coming up that are planned to come up with the Trump-Xi summit is Taiwan, of course, and then agriculture is a big one for the U.S. side, and rare earth a little bit less so. But how do you see that? Because President Trump has said he will bring up the case of Jimmy Lai and human rights. That's a topic that most presidents have shied away from, human rights in general, when it comes to China. Why is that?
Yeah, presidents have shied away from human rights in China since at least Tiananmen Square, right? That this is something that presidents have not only shied away from, but they've essentially covered up for. This is what Tiananmen was in 1989 under the George H.W. Bush administration, then Bill Clinton, who was at first criticizing Bush in their debate in 1992, said, "I wouldn't do that. I would stand up for the Chinese people who are being repressed by this terrible communist regime." And of course, he did nothing of the sort. He was the person who ushered along the world trade, the WTO, China's access to the WTO by getting China permanent normal trade relations, PNTR. And same happened with George W. Bush. Same happened with Barack Obama. They've all paid no attention. A lot of the times, they haven't even said anything. Never mind make Beijing hurt for its human rights abuses. And we've seen what's happened. Of course, you will know a lot more about this than I do. But what's happened to Falun Gong? No one has made any very little noise coming out of Washington about that over the last several decades. So when President Trump says he's going to make some noise over human rights, I think this is a very big deal, and I think it marks a significant change from his predecessors.
And part of that whole focus was, in the past, you had certain Chinese administrations, if you want to call them administrations, where they tackled the strategy of really reaching out to the elites and making it in their interest to support the growth of communist China, to open up their markets, and eventually now it's seen as a peer competitor. I think you lay out a lot of that in your own book, The China Matrix, how the elites are, part of this whole thing, and it's gotten to the point where now presidents are facing that issue or dilemma where you can't really pressure the communist regime because it is now a peer competitor. Lay out that argument, and what can President Trump do now?
Well, this is a very big problem, and it's been a problem going back for nearly 50 years. And of course, this relationship started with Nixon and Kissinger's opening to China during the February 1973 trip. So it's over half a century. But this is what's been going on the whole time. I mean, there's a relationship. The first relationship, the core relationship, is between political and corporate elites in the United States. The whole point then has been for the corporate elites to get the political elites to play nice with China so they can make lots of money. And this has happened even though the corporate elites have found out that they're getting ripped off in China, or some of them want to get in and they want to make deals and they can't make deals, and their intellectual property is stolen and they're forced to transfer technology, and now a lot of them are simply being pushed out because CCP companies have replaced them. So it's been a disaster. I have to say that this is one thing that that critics of President Trump have been a little bit concerned about, especially regarding the TikTok deal. Now, it's not clear to me exactly what the status of that deal is, but this seemed to resemble previous arrangements between political officials, U.S. political officials, and U.S. corporate interests. That it was very important for different U.S. investors to see a huge return from TikTok, of course, its parent company being ByteDance, and the IPO, should there be an IPO for ByteDance, is expected to reap many hundreds of billions of dollars. So again, it's not entirely clear to me where that deal is right now. But yeah, but this is certainly something we would like to see the president to move away from. I want to come back to something really crucial, though. You mentioned Taiwan in the beginning. The way I believe that President Trump sees Taiwan, and I think the appropriate way to see Taiwan, is as a function of a much larger problem. Taiwan is obviously strategically crucial for the United States, right? And for Western civilization, the entire First Island chain. If China makes a run on the First Island chain, makes a run on Taiwan, that's a big problem. But the reason that China's military is such a threat, the reason the People's Liberation Army is so big and so powerful, as Donald Trump has said many times before, is because the United States has made China rich. It's made the Chinese Communist Party rich. And a lot of that has come through the trade imbalance, the enormous trade deficit that the United States has been running with China for decades now. This amounts to a transfer of trillions and trillions of dollars over the last many decades. So this is why the tariff regime, this is why the trade war has been so important to President Trump, to eliminate that trade deficit, or at least in the meantime, at least until it's eliminated, cut it down seriously, and to take the money that the People's Republic of China has been used to investing in different instruments to defeat the United States, to take that money away from them. So that's really the big picture, and that's how Donald Trump sees it, and that's what I explain in a very long interview with the president in my book, The China Matrix.
And very quickly in the end, given what you know of President Trump, meeting him and all of that, how would you compare Trump 1.0 to the current administration when it comes to the China strategy? Any differences, similarities from Trump 1.0?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing right now is we're seeing that Donald Trump has been rolling up Beijing's allies around the world, Iran, Maduro in Venezuela, what the different attention that we've paid to Chinese interference in the Western Hemisphere, including the Panama Canal. I mean, there's certainly a lot more to do. The different problems in the Western Hemisphere, but certainly in the Middle East, there is no power. Right? People talk here about about other powers, whether it's Qatar or Russia, trying to damage our position in the Middle East. There is no power that wants to see the U.S. pushed out of the Middle East more than China, right? And so this is a very big deal. That's the big difference right now. The amount of leverage that Donald Trump has over Xi Jinping and that he has over the Chinese Communist Party, and that is because he has his boot on Iran's throat. That's a very big deal.
Definitely a lot at play here. Lee Smith, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.